Apologize to Laura.
My husband, Tom, who didn't know anything, yelled at me angrily. Behind him, Laura, my son's wife, was fake crying and sniffling. I couldn't forgive Laura for disregarding my efforts, nor could I forgive Tom for siding with her. I had tried my best to get along with Laura, but she never responded to my efforts to reach out. Instead, she just distanced herself even more. And Tom, always taking her side, was just as bad. He never believed a single word I said, and constantly blamed me for everything. By this point, my love for him had completely faded. They both betrayed me, and they need to face consequences. With that resolve, I decided to start my plan to drag them both down and make them pay. My name is Susan, and I'm a homemaker in my 70s. I live with my retired husband, Tom. We have one son, Chris, but he moved out when he graduated from college and got a job at a company. At his job, Chris hit it off with a woman named Laura, and they eventually got married. For a while, Chris and Laura lived far away, but as my husband and I started getting older, they decided to move closer to us. While we're grateful just to have someone nearby to help us if needed, I started to worry if Laura was really okay with that. Chris, however, felt it was only natural for him, as an only son, to support his family, but he didn't seem to ask Laura much about her feelings. I never imagined that this situation would lead to what it has now. The relationship with Laura wasn't what I would call a good one. Laura didn't like interacting with us more than necessary, and if I visited without much of a reason, she would often look displeased.
Susan, are you looking for ways to kill time? I don't have time to spend with you. I'm about to head out with some friends, so could you do some of the housework for me?
One weekday, I stopped by their place to share some food, and Laura, all dressed up, snapped that. Looking around, I noticed the house was fairly messy, and it was clear Laura hadn't done much cleaning. Living in such a place didn't seem healthy for them, so I agreed to help with the housework. I spent about half a day cleaning their house. The place, which had been scattered with trash and clutter, transformed into a much cleaner space after I patiently tidied up for hours. This should make things easier for them to live in. Hoping that Laura might show a little appreciation, I was making dinner at their house when she came back from her outing and spoke to me.
Wow, thanks, Susan. I knew you were great at this. I should have relied on you from the beginning. Please keep it up from now on.
What? I couldn't help but let out a small gasp at her words. What does she mean by from now on? Am I supposed to keep doing the housework for them from now on? Sensing my confusion, Laura continued.
You see, I'm really busy, and there are a lot of days when I can't manage the housework. You've got free time, right, Susan? So why not use it to help us out?
Hey, aren't you a full-time homemaker? It's not right to neglect your own housework. You should handle your own responsibilities. I couldn't help but snap back, and Laura responded with a frustrated and nonsensical argument.
I didn't think you were this difficult to talk to, Susan. I just asked for a little help. You don't need to get so angry.
In the end, our conversation didn't go well, and since it was getting late, I decided to head home. From that day on, Laura started calling me more frequently, asking me to help with her housework. But I refused to give in. Then, maybe annoyed by my refusal, Laura started coming over to my house to complain.
Susan never listens to my requests. This is real mother-in-law bullying.
Although I found her antics bothersome, I couldn't just let it go. So I kept telling her over and over that as a full-time homemaker, she needed to take care of her own house, but she wouldn't listen. As I wondered what to do, Tom stepped in.
She's been asking you so nicely. Why don't you just help out? You've got the free time, so it wouldn't hurt to lend a hand.
I was stunned. I never expected Tom to take Laura's side. Hearing Tom's words, Laura's eyes lit up.
As expected of you, Tom. I knew you'd understand how I feel.
Blushing slightly, Tom replied,
Well, you looked like you were really struggling. I'm sorry if Susan's been rude.
His words implied that I was the one at fault. Why am I the one being blamed? Was my behavior wrong? As I fell silent, unsure of the answer, Tom ordered me to continue doing the housework at their place, and to change my attitude toward Laura, making sure I never say anything harsh to her again. Why do I have to listen to this? Laura is the one at fault, not me, and Tom is taking her side. He should be able to see that Laura needs to put in more effort. Noticing my frustration, Tom frowned and scolded me harshly.
You're a terrible person for treating her like this. Think about Laura's feelings.
I couldn't accept Tom's reasoning and only felt more irritated, but I didn't want to escalate the argument further, so I reluctantly gave a simple response. Fine. Satisfied, Laura left, and the situation seemed to calm down. But inside, I was still filled with resentment. After that, I went to their house almost every day to do the housework. Laura relied on me completely and refused to do any chores herself, leaving me with a mountain of work to do. Handling housework for 2 households by myself was exhausting. Every day, I came home tired, but predictably, Tom never once expressed any appreciation. Amid all this, my husband and I were preparing to move. We had been looking for a new home to enjoy our retirement, and we finally found a nice, newly built house. It wasn't far from where we lived, so the distance between Chris and Laura's house didn't change much. Even though we were moving, Tom still insisted that I continue doing their housework, and I couldn't help but feel bitter as we prepared for the move. Not long after we had finished most of the unpacking, Chris and Laura came over to visit. They said they were here to bring us a housewarming gift. Laura handed me a plate of what she claimed was a premium steak, which apparently cost over $1,000 per serving.
Susan, we really appreciate all you've done for us.
Laura said as she handed me my plate. It's not every day you get to eat a premium steak, so I was excited at first, but when I peeked at the contents of the plate, I quickly came back to my senses. Of course, Laura wouldn't celebrate me honestly. She's been treating me terribly all this time, so it's obvious she's up to something this time too. Feeling foolish for even getting my hopes up, I sighed deeply and tossed the plate straight into the trash. Laura froze in shock.
What's going on?
It seemed that Chris knew nothing about the steak. And then, as expected, Tom, who had always sided with Laura, turned red with anger at what I had done.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
He was furious, without even knowing why I had acted that way, condemning me outright. Seeing this, Laura started to fake tears, which only fueled Tom's outrage even more.
Apologize to Laura.
I was fed up with Tom, who was so blinded by his anger that he couldn't see what was really going on. Neither Laura nor Tom would listen to anything I had to say anymore. As feelings of resignation mixed with rising anger over everything they had done, I couldn't hold back any longer. I opened my mouth to speak the truth. Did you even look inside? There's no food in there.
What?
Tom tilted his head in confusion. Laura, clearly flustered, quickly chimed in.
Why are you making up such lies? I just wanted to celebrate your move, Susan. It's terrible for you to say something like that.
Saying that, Laura continued to fake her tears. Chris, looking exasperated by the whole scene, retrieved the plate I had thrown in the trash to check for himself. What he found wasn't steak at all. The plate was packed with used tissues, torn up pieces of paper, and all sorts of trash. It seemed Laura had removed the steak from my plate and replaced it with garbage. It was the kind of harassment that was not only childish but also made me seriously question her decency as a person. Realizing that everything had been exposed, Laura started spouting nonsensical excuses.
I didn't mean it like that. I was just trying to lighten the mood.
Lighten the mood, from my perspective. It felt more like she was showing just how much she despised me, and it was honestly quite a shock. Maybe because Laura was desperately clinging to him, Tom stepped forward, defending her.
I'm sure she had her reasons. It's unthinkable to dismiss her like that.
Even now, Tom was siding with Laura. In situations like this, shouldn't a husband support his wife and try to straighten out Laura's twisted behavior?
Tom is the only one on my side.
With Tom backing her, Laura threw a tantrum and clung to him. I could see Tom looking somewhat pleased by this. The truth is, there's a reason Tom always takes Laura's side. And that reason is something that cannot be forgiven. I know exactly why. I had planned to keep quiet about it, but if the two of them kept up this charade, I had my own ideas. I decided I would expose the secret I had intended to take to the grave. You have a reason for protecting Laura so much, don't you?
No, I don't.
Tom shook his head in denial when I asked.
As her father-in-law and as a man, it's only natural to help her if she's in trouble. Look at her, she's crying. Continuing to blame her any further would be cruel.
Tom said, still defending Laura. As he shielded her, I noticed the corners of Laura's mouth lift into a slight smirk behind his back. But Tom's words were lies. There's no way he'd help Laura for no reason. Tom and Laura share a certain secret. A secret so serious that it's hard to even bring it to light. I pulled out an envelope from the cupboard, ready to expose it. Tom looked at me suspiciously.
What do you think you're doing? Whatever you try now won't change the fact that you've done something awful.
Tom tried to intimidate me, but I ignored him and spread the contents of the envelope on the table. Chris, curious about what was going on, moved closer to the table. But Laura, who had already seen what was happening, quickly raised her voice.
Don't look.
The truth was, Laura and Tom had been having an affair. I had long been suspicious of Tom's excessive favoritism toward Laura, so I hired a private investigator to look into their relationship. After 2 months of investigation, it was confirmed they were guilty. While I was supposedly away on trips with friends, Tom had gone on a romantic getaway with Laura. On nights when he claimed to be out late drinking, he was actually spending time alone with her. Care to explain these photos? I asked Laura, but she just shook her head.
These are fake.
But Tom, realizing there was no escaping it anymore, began to confess. Their affair started with Laura's advances. Back when Chris and Laura had just gotten married, Laura had been the one to approach Tom. At first, Tom resisted her advances, thinking it was wrong to be involved with his son's wife, but over time, as his affection for me faded, he began to find Laura more and more attractive. Tom admitted that he couldn't resist his own desires and began an affair with Laura. By that point, he felt there was no turning back, so he figured he might as well enjoy it while he could. Did you really think you wouldn't get caught?
I was determined to hide it completely.
What does he mean, hide it completely? The way he blatantly defended Laura made it obvious something was going on between them. It's no wonder people got suspicious. Laura just kept crying and wouldn't say anything. Her silence frustrated me even more. Why did I have to go through all this? I had been betrayed by Tom, had my husband stolen by Laura, and for so long, I was blamed and used by both of them. Neither of them could ever understand how I felt. It had been painful, long years. Until this came to light, I truly loved Tom, no question about that. But in the end, this is where it led me. Tears welled up from the anger and disbelief. I couldn't help but feel sorry for myself. I found myself resenting my younger self from so many years ago, wondering why I ever married someone like this. My love for Tom had completely vanished. Any sense of commitment I once had to keeping our marriage together was now gone. All that was left in me was an unspeakable anger toward Tom and Laura, and sheer disbelief that they thought they could get away with such foolish behavior. Why did I deserve such a brutal betrayal? What had I done to deserve this? No matter whom I asked, I knew I wouldn't get an answer. Because the truth was, I had done nothing wrong. And yet, this is how I was treated. I had done nothing to harm either of them, and yet I was cruelly betrayed and driven to despair. My heart wasn't generous enough to forgive them for what they'd done. There was no reason to show mercy to people like them. For all the pain and despair I had suffered, they deserved to be dragged down to the very depths of hell. Even if they realized how much I had suffered and apologized from the bottom of their hearts, I would never forgive them. Only then would my revenge be complete. Tom was apologizing on the spot, begging for forgiveness. Behind him, Laura was still crying. Only Chris stood there, looking down at the two of them with disappointment. Even in this situation, my anger didn't subside. If anything, it kept growing. I couldn't stop myself anymore, not toward Laura or Tom. You know what? Stop brushing me off.
I'm not. I'm really, truly sorry.
I didn't say you could speak. When I snapped, Tom fell silent, looking ashamed. Do you really think apologizing now will make everything okay? Let me tell you, ever since I found out about your relationship, I've been thinking about how to get my revenge on both of you. I've spent every day imagining how I could make you feel like you're in hell, how I could make you regret what you did to me. I spent every day thinking about that. Can you even imagine how much I suffered? Can you understand how much pain I was in? Of course you can't. You're the ones who caused it. After I said that all in one breath, Laura, who had been crying nonstop, suddenly spoke up.
You don't have to say such horrible things. We had our reasons too. Besides, isn't part of the blame on you, Susan? If you had kept Tom happy, this wouldn't have happened. Blaming us for everything and acting like you're completely innocent is just wrong.
It was clear Laura hadn't learned anything. Her attitude made Tom's face turn pale. The more Laura talked, the more cornered Tom seemed to feel.
Please, just be quiet. Can't you see what'll happen if you make her even angrier?
Tom, clearly panicking, tried to stop Laura. Laura, clearly not satisfied, began to throw a fit.
Why is even Tom blaming me?
Tom, seemingly unable to hold back his frustration with Laura any longer, started to lash out at her.
That's exactly what I can't stand about you.
Laura fired back with even harsher words. An argument of insults had begun.
You were the one who went along with my advances, Tom. So why are you saying this now?
I didn't realize how stubborn you were until now.
That's awful. I thought you understood me.
You have no right to say that after betraying people.
Tom and Laura began a full-blown argument, accusing each other of their wrongdoings. Both were guilty, but each tried to shift the blame to lessen their own fault. I couldn't help but sigh. It wasn't about who was more to blame. Laura, who initiated it, and Tom, who went along with it, both betrayed Chris and me. If they could think rationally for just a moment, they would realize that, instead, they kept pushing the guilt onto each other, trying to save themselves. I found it all absurdly ridiculous. At the same time, I couldn't help but feel sorry for myself for being manipulated by such people. If I had known the truth sooner, I wouldn't have been forced into doing Laura's housework or dealing with that absurdly offensive steak plate filled with trash. If I had sought out the truth earlier, if I had exposed it sooner, maybe I wouldn't have been hurt as deeply. I was even disappointed in myself for being so slow to act. As I watched them with these thoughts running through my mind, Chris, who had been silent until now, suddenly shouted,
Enough.
He grabbed Laura by the collar, his face flushed with anger, and shouted out everything he had been holding inside.
How can you not be ashamed after causing so much trouble for both my mom and me? You've been betraying us all along, and I don't see any sign of remorse. Why haven't you even apologized? What you two did is unforgivable. It's a betrayal to both me and my mom. And even so, all you care about is saving your own skin. Why won't you offer a real apology? It's clear you have no regret at all.
I nodded in agreement with every word Chris said. All they cared about was protecting themselves, without showing the slightest concern for the pain they had caused us. Chris is usually such a calm person. Seeing him this furious, with his face red, yelling at Laura and Tom, was a first for me. Even though his anger wasn't directed at me, I could feel the fear and intimidation radiating from him, making me tremble. Naturally, Laura and Tom, who were on the receiving end of his rage, were far more terrified, shaking uncontrollably as they apologized.
We're sorry. We never meant for this to happen. We didn't mean to hurt anyone.
Though Laura apologized, Chris didn't accept a single word of it. The only sound in the room was Laura's sobbing. Tom stood frozen, unable to say a word. No one was left to oppose Chris and me anymore. No one was left to blame me like before. And with that, my story of revenge had come to an end. After that, both my marriage and Chris's ended in divorce. I had planned to divorce Tom ever since the affair came to light, so our separation went relatively smoothly. On the other hand, Chris and Laura's divorce took much longer. Laura resisted as much as she could.
I still love you.
She cried, clinging to Chris despite her infidelity, and refusing to accept the divorce. However, when the case went to court, it became clear that Laura was in the wrong, and after a lengthy mediation, they finally divorced. I heard that Laura has now started an unfamiliar part-time job to pay off the alimony. The new house we moved into that day remained with Tom, so Chris and I moved into a new place together. With the substantial sum of money we each received in alimony, we were financially comfortable. For a long time, I had been deeply hurt. Now, I want to spend the rest of my life being true to myself, taking things slowly and peacefully, healing those old wounds, and finding tranquility in my final years.